Hello, everyone. Welcome to our July Training Tuesday event for OU Campus. Today's topic is the mechanics of OU Campus. We're going to be going behind the scenes of the CMS and explaining how it works to turn your designs and files into pages on your live website. During the presentation, all participants will be in a listen-only mode as the session is being recorded. If you have a question during the presentation, please use the Q&A function found at the bottom of your screen. To exit full screen, hover over the top of the window, click View Options, and select Exit Full Screen. We will attempt to address any questions during the presentation. After the formal presentation has ended, we will review and answer all remaining questions. Your presenter today is Robert Kiffe, Senior Technical Support Engineer at OmniUpdate. Rob, I will hand it over to you.
Thank you, Erica. Welcome, everyone, and hello. So we wanted to talk about how things tick in the background for you guys, especially regarding your templates. And so there's a couple key pointers that I want to just mention real quick, is that we do want to try and explain this at a little bit of a higher level. We're not going to try to go down into too much coding details or anything like that. But I do plan to show you a little bit of XSL at the end, so hopefully it will be nothing too bad that you need to worry about, but just a little disclaimer there. So first of all, let's take a look at what we're going to be doing today. So we want to just do a quick system overview, explain a couple key pointers. Hopefully this is a review for a lot of you. Then I want to reiterate some of the key functionality pieces of OU Campus. So we'll take a look at those items. And then what I want to do is I want to show you how those things might work on a flat HTML page. And then we're going to talk about the benefits and the power of the pairing of XML and XSL and why we moved in that direction. And then the idea is that we'll go and I'll try to show you a quick demo of that in action. And then if you guys have any other questions, please check in and I'll try to answer them as best as I can at the end. All right, so as a quick overview, just to remind people that we are a decoupled CMS, and that means that OU Campus lives in its own environment, and this is, in effect, becomes your staging environment. And what happens is that you build out and maintain your pages in OU Campus, and when deemed ready, then you would then publish out to your production server. And so the idea is that there's a couple benefits, and we can talk about some of those. But the idea is that OU Campus is going to push out finalized pages to your production environment, and that gives a couple benefits. One is that it doesn't require, your production server does not require the bandwidth and the computing power to also run our CMS. That's handled by a completely separate server. The other benefit is that it's standalone. It's not required. Your website is there on its own, ready to handle the web. Whereas it does not need to do any further communication back to OU Campus. So there's a lot of speed benefits, there's a lot of redundancy benefits there, and anybody that's kind of used OU Campus should probably be familiar with those at this point. But I want to reiterate the point that we are actually publishing out a file folder architecture, and these, that basically goes with a particular content structure for your website. Again, the advantage here is that, that capability is solely on your web server to host your website. And by taking away a lot of the functionality of trying to build out the content of your pages, build out the structure of your pages via the CMS, that now is being offloaded and done on our system, and it helps your pages with load time and stuff like that. So that's a benefit. Anyways, what I wanted to talk about here was that the system OU Campus is basically a big web app server. It's Java-based. And a lot of the functionality comes from pairing of our user interface with a system database in the back end that basically stores extra information from each of your different pages. But ultimately, we want to be able to work with any particular website, web server, web technology. And so, we wanted to try and make it as server agnostic as possible. That was one of the reasons why we wanted to make it a decoupled system. That allows us to work with any server-side language, and at that point, with any server type too. So let's just reiterate a little bit of the tools that we have in OU Campus that allow you to maintain content for your website. So the first is going to be page-based content. So this is the information that you will be maintaining from page to page. We have editable regions, so you should be very familiar with our WYSIWYG, especially our new Just Edit. Well, I shouldn't say new at this point anymore, but our Just Edit WYSIWYG editor, which really gives you a good in-context preview of what that content's going to look like before you publish it out. We also have kind of more form field-based entry, so multi-edit and our parameter fields. These are built out on a per page basis, and they allow for custom editing such that you can really restrict down what's available for your end users to be able to modify. So that's just a couple items that are worth knowing when you're trying to figure out how your template's going to work, and whether or not you want how much access you want to give to your users for managing that content. And then, of course, we have the ability to make selections for assets and galleries and stuff like that. And that is something that you can then choose on a per page. But ultimately, that content will actually live in another location, which we'll get to in just a second. So the next step is that we do have a way to store some information at a directory level. And so the most common one that we'll have is directory variables. Now, in most cases, if it's not built out, you do have some default directory variable settings. One of them is, for example, you can set the location of where the media folder is by default for when you go to browse for an image. And this will make it a lot easier for end users to find the appropriate content for their pages. But I should go back for just a second. But we can also integrate these into the templates such that they are also a way of storing information at a folder level. So we can also create extra directory variables that store basic information. Let's say you want to store the path to an include file, so that particular section can use, that include file for that whole area of the site. And that way you don't have to go for each and every page and pick that particular include. Another idea is that maybe you have like a theme color built out with your templates, your template design, that is. And let's say all it is a class, or maybe just a background or something like that. What we could do is we could set up a directory variable that stores either that class information or whatever kind of information that you need to identify that particular location. And then the XSL, which we'll get into in just a little bit, what it can do is it can basically read that information and then apply that class or that style directly to your HTML. So that's some benefits there. Alternatively, even if you don't want to mess with the XSL, the directory variables are something that can be accessed inside your actual templates, and that's when I refer to that, I'm talking about your new page wizards or your new file templates, and those, we can go into a little bit more detail another day. I was going to try and skip over those for this particular session. But if you guys are, interested in something a little bit more in depth with that, I can certainly do another session for that. But the idea is that there are ways that you can then pull that information such that when you create a new page, that gets pushed onto the new page. So for example, you could have a directory variable that stores some basic keywords or something like that. And then that way, when you create a new page, it's already going to come with some default items. So things like that. Then to kind of augment the capabilities of directory variables, because in a sense, directory variables store just a text value. We wanted to also expand that functionality and maybe have, something where you could store like a file chooser, or you could store, a preset set of options. And so we came up with these things that we called section properties. And almost all implementations these days, we've been using this tool. And what it is basically just a special file that we create for each folder that you build out. And it stores basically just some page property fields that allow the users to store some information. And then it's up to the XSL to then go and grab that information and then do items and things accordingly. So just as a quick recap here, this is what our directory variable menu is going to look like. So you can choose to create your own by adding one, or you can pick from some of the existing ones and modify them at a per folder level. And the idea with these is that you can set them at the extreme site-most level, or you can set them at a per folder, and it's going to apply that setting all the way down to the end of the folder chain. And then what you can do is you can go to any subfolder that you wish, and then you can just override it at that level, and then that setting will then continue down the chain until it gets overridden again or not. So it's a pretty powerful tool for making a setting that can apply to a bunch of pages, so that way you don't have to touch them individually. Okay, so that was folder based. Now technically you could set something at the site and it would apply to the whole site, but what are some other items that you can store content wise across the entire site? Well, of course, you might have some include files built into your design and your templates. And so these include files might live at the root of your site. Perhaps you've got multiple sites and these are actually something that are included across multiple sites. But the idea is that these are just include files that you can maintain, and you publish them out once and all of your pages will then automatically get those updates. The next is something that we built more into the UI of OU Campus, and these are assets. And hopefully you have some familiarity with assets at this point, but the idea is that these are, in a way, managed includes. So the idea is that you can create this content that's global, and then your users can then go, hey, I want to reuse that content across a bunch of my pages, so they can go and place it. And then the idea is that the administrators and the content editors can manage the content in the asset in one location, and it's going to affect all the pages that are subscribed to it. And so it's a kind of a similar way to how the includes work, but you do have to apply it to the pages that you want it to be put on. Okay, so what are some of the options that we have with the assets? Well, of course, we have our basic web content one, which is essentially just a WYSIWYG editor that allows you to put in some content and manage it within a WYSIWYG. Your other options are you have a source code editor, and so therefore you can put in some straight source code. Now, I'll get to talk about this in a little bit, but keep in mind that if you're trying to put certain server-side functionality, certain server-side code in here, keep in mind that ultimately most of you guys will be working with PCF pages, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more in just a second. And so it will need to make sure that the code that you put in there is going to be well-formed in the sense that it's going to apply to XML standards and syntax. So we'll talk about that in a second. So there's a little bit of a caveat there. But ultimately, the idea is that this is a way that you can put in some code that would be easier to maintain in the source view as opposed to in a WYSIWYG. And there are plenty of reasons why you might have that. You might have like a really complicated HTML structure for like a callout or something like that. And it just makes more sense for, let's say, a more web-based editor to maintain it in the source code than it is to maintain it in a WYSIWYG. And keep in mind that this is something that's managed in one location. So if the person that's comfortable with maintaining it in the source code can do it, then what's the big deal? So it's just another option. We have, of course, our simple text. This is the most simplistic one. It's literally just a text string, and the idea is that it makes it really easy in case you want to distribute, let's say, like a president's name or the enrollment number or something like that, that you well, hopefully the present doesn't change very often, but the idea is that things that could change pretty often, you don't want to have to go searching and hunting for your entire site, to change. You can store in this one location and then recommend that your users make use of this. And that way you can change it in one spot. Image galleries are, of course, another option that we have, and that's more managed. It'll create thumbnails and stuff like that. And you can either use it so that you can reuse that gallery across a couple pages, or you may find that you would only put it on one page. Let's say it's the pictures for a particular event or something like that. But the advantage is that it's going to create all the thumbnails for you, and you don't have to do that extra work. And of course, we have web forms. Both of these last two do require our LDP platform, our live delivery platform, I should say. And the web forms are a nice way to allow you to build out some, and I should say simplistic forms, but we've actually, our current iterations allow for some decently complex forms and stuff like that. But the idea is it's an easy interface for people to create some basic forms that they can distribute through their site for contact information, for getting some kind of basic information from their web visitors. And so just a review here of what that asset listing might look like. Okay, so in this case, I want to take a quick detour, and I want to just demo some of these features in a basic HTML page. So this is going to go back to the world before XSL. So if I just go over to my instance of OU Campus, and I happen to have a little Training Tuesday folder, and I'm happy to share this. I'm going to zip it up afterwards, and if anybody wants it, you're welcome to steal it. It's real rudimentary, but I just wanted to show you. So the first what we're going to do is we're going to go into this HTML page. And when I click edit, it's going to attempt to throw everything into the WYSIWYG, which is not really a good thing, because if you notice, this is my real super basic Bootstrap template that I've created. And so what I really want to do right now is I want to be able to click edit and then edit the regions, but I can't because it's not tagged for OU Campus yet. So this goes into one of those first bullet points that I mentioned, which was the editable regions for a page. So how does that work? What we do is we create these special tags. And again, I don't want to go into too much detail. So just hopefully you can follow along for just a second. But basically what we do is we throw these little tags onto the page, and it lets our system know that this is a special region. So in this case, the first one I'm going to use is the properties tag. And so this is going to tell the system, hey, these are important items that aren't necessarily visible. So I want you to show this content in our page parameter / properties section of the editor. So I'll just wrap that content, the title, the meta, in this OUC properties. And this is the comment style of our OU tags. And then if I want to then also have, let's say, a little mini WYSIWYG region, I can do something very similar, except this time it's a slightly different tag name. And I need a couple other fields. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I'll just type them out real quick. So the first is a unique ID. So this is, let's say, column 1. And then I'm going to need a access setting. So I'm going to have a group of who can actually edit this. And for now, I'm going to say everyone. And this is because I don't necessarily want to allow everyone to edit this particular region, but what I'm effectively saying here is everyone who has access to this page, I'm going to let edit this region, because they have to have access to be able to get to the edit portion in the first place. So it's safe for me to leave this as everyone for the moment, but keep in mind that you could set this so that you are limiting it to a particular group. So that's something that might be useful to know. So group everyone. Then I'm going to need a button. And in this case, if I just give it some text, I can choose what button or what text I want it to say. So I'll just say edit column 1 like that. Okay, and then I'm just going to wrap that around, and by wrapping it just means that I have a opening tag and then I have a closing tag. And as you can see from the syntax, it's very similar to what a node would actually look like, an actual element. And that will actually come into play when we start dealing with XML. So all I need to do is that, and now I've got it, I'm going to have a visible editable region. So I'm going to just click save, and I'm going to click preview, which automatically happens when I hit save. Then I'm going to click edit, and now instead of having everything thrown into the WYSIWYG region, I'm actually getting this little edit button that shows up. And furthermore, if I click over into properties, you'll see that my title and my description have now come through, and I can choose to actually add a description. And so if I save that, I can go back to my source code real quick, and I can just see that that came in and updated that. Meanwhile, I'm going to just click save and click edit again. If I click into my editable region here, you can see that I get a just edit WYSIWYG editor now for my content region. And you can see that it's perfectly styled for how my page looks. So I can come in and add more stuff as needed. I know it's wonderful code here. I probably should have had some more MIPS ready. But there you have it. So not too bad. So this is something that, you know, ideally, hopefully, if you guys get anything out of this, I want you to realize that there's a lot of options that, you know, don't even require XSL. That, you know, maybe you have a marketing one-off, you know, landing page that's real simple. It doesn't even use your main header and footer or something like that. You could create, you know, just grab the HTML, throw it in OU Campus, and then throw a couple tags on it. And then now you've got a couple things that you can edit it, and you can, you know, make a template out of it. There's lots of options with that. Keep in mind that if you did want to throw a form on there, especially an LDP form, then it is going to require XSL. So we'll get into that in just a second. But just to go over one last thing, since in case you guys are curious, there's a couple settings that we can do to modify this, and I don't want to go into too much detail. Whoops, my monitor cuts out every so often. I think you guys are still good. Okay, and what I'm going to do is just show you what that one looks like. It's OUC editor, and then what I can do is I can give it a CSS path, and this would be if I wanted to give it a location for where I might have some CSS that would then modify the WYSIWYG. And so this is useful for making it so that your WYSIWYG properly matches what happens when you actually click publish or preview, because sometimes there's going to be some styling on your website that might just not work within the WYSIWYG. And whether or not it's because it's like, let's say, a CSS class that's expecting like a direct child, a direct descendant, and because the WYSIWYG kind of throws an extra little boundary or container in there, that could throw off some styling there. Or just who knows. You know, so one thing you could do is you could come in and you could create some CSS that would then kind of directly modify it to make sure that it properly matches. It doesn't happen very often. Or you might even get the case where you might want to have the actual system, you know, look different when you're in the WYSIWYG editor. Maybe you want to just automatically make sure that, you know, div regions have a little border on them so it's a little bit more visible or something like that. But it's not going to affect what happens when you publish that content out or even when you click preview. It's just for while it's in the WYSIWYG region. So anyways, I'm trying to get to that point here. So we usually keep it in the resources OU editor folder, and then we usually call it like WYSIWYG CSS. And then, you know, but you could have a number of different ones, and as you could see, you could have a different one for each different region that you had. And then the other kind of important one that I'm not going to go into too much detail, we have plenty of documentation, and if you guys are interested and there's time at the end, I can go into it in more detail. But for now, CSS menu. This is basically what this is going to do is this is a file that stores classes that you might want to apply to the content in your WYSIWYG region. And this is really useful if you want to have alternative styling for headings, alternative style for paragraphs, maybe some special highlight code that matches your template design instead of having to give access to the toolbar for the background color and stuff like that. So this is a really useful tool for maintaining and keeping people with using the styles of your particular site. And so that's a pretty important feature. And feel free to check in with us if you have any questions. But I want to just make sure that you're aware of what tools are out there. And so I'll just go ahead and just throw this in. It's usually like styles.txt or something like that. But it can be customized. We can have a separate one for each WYSIWYG region as needed. So you can see it's not going to do too much here, but if I did choose the style dropdown, now I'm going to get a couple options here, and these are just test default styles. But that's where that styles CSS menu setting comes in with the styles dropdown. Okay, so that being done, I wanted to then take a step back. Note that I could do multi-edit and I could show some other things, but there's just not enough time to show you all the different settings for that. Keep in mind that we do have we are working on updating our existing support site. It has all the information out there, but we're working on making it a little bit easier to consume. In the meantime, we have created this PDF, and feel free to check in if you want it. But basically, it's got a list of basically all the different settings that you can have and example code. So you can throw in, let's say, a select dropdown. You can throw in a radio, and it's just got the code ready to go, and you can just copy and paste it right in. So if you're interested in that, let me know, and we'll get that to you. Okay, so I will check for questions. I guess if you have any, we can come back to it. But for now, I'm going to move on. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And let's go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so that was all great, especially for simple HTML pages. But what happens when we want to have a more complex design? What happens when we want to give our users a little bit more flexibility on how that page is actually going to look? Because what happens if I create a 2-column template and then really, I needed a 3-column one? Rather than having to create a new file, copy over the content, what if we could just change a setting and now all of a sudden that page is a 3-column page? Well, that's going to require some kind of logical, programming logic in there. And so what we've decided is, this was actually decided a long time ago, we've decided to go down the route of XSL. And so this takes a little bit of a back step into the history of OU Campus. We originally didn't have XSL. It was just a flat HTML. You'd just tag the pages and you'd have a template that creates one of those new files that has the tags already on it, and that was your template. And what's the big deal? It worked fine. Well, as of course things got web got more complicated and we wanted to have more functionality, we started researching a couple other options. Now, being that our actual system is built on Java, we didn't necessarily want to force people to write Java code. So we wanted something that was going to work with any kind of language. And at the time, XML XSL was definitely a pretty popular item at the time, and so what we went into was the XSL engine. And when we first started with it, the main goal was that we wanted to be able to separate, and this is still a goal, but what we wanted to do is we wanted to separate the content from the design. So we wanted to take out the things that were repeated from page to page to page, because what's the point of having to if you needed to make an update, why would you want to have that on every single page? If you needed to change it, you'd have to change all your pages and then republish them. So if we could pull that out and put that in a global location where we could modify it, then that would be the ideal. And this is akin to what happened with early web with HTML and CSS. Originally, you had all your styles embedded into your HTML code, and then you decided, oh, yeah, I kind of wanted a different font for that. Well, now you had to go touch all your paragraph tags and change the font, which that's no fun. And so somebody created this idea of CSS, which allowed you to store your styles in a global location, and then that way you could modify the design, in one location, and it could affect your entire website. And it was really popular, took off. That's known as cascading style sheets, of course. And XSL was a kind of a second step to that. And in fact, its name kind of comes from that. I don't have it on my slide here, but what it stands for is Extensible Style Sheet Language. So it even has style sheet in it. And so the idea is that we are styling basically the XML content. And so, we're telling how to actually view that content, if that makes sense. So our basic equation is that we have our XML, which is the content, and then we run it through the XSL, which is the structure and the design. And when you publish it, or technically preview it, then you're going to get HTML as your final result. And this is the tool that allows us to get the adjustable layouts and the optional features that we are so expected of now. And so, it not only does that, but it also gives us more flexibility in actually transforming content too. And so I'm going to get into this in a little bit more detail in just a minute. But the idea is that there are cases, especially as the web gets more, websites get more and more complicated and amazing in regards to responsive design and flexibility for different browsers and stuff like that. There's sometimes a lot more code that goes into your content to really help it display correctly. And so a lot of those things can be invisible, attributes or invisible elements wrapped around your content, and those things are really hard to edit in the WYSIWYG region. And so, what we can do is with the XSL, we can really, target some of that content, and then we can transform it into that final HTML. So we'll get into that in a little bit more detail in just a second. But one of the other big items that the XSL allows us to do is that because the content is removed and isolated, so to speak, we can take that content and then we can push it out into other formats. So if you did want to have, let's say, your faculty profile information pushed out as an XML file, which now could be read by other scripts, etc., that's a possibility. You don't have to go scan through an HTML page to get the information that you want or anything like that. That can be readily available in another output format. Another one that you'll often see, especially like on catalog sites, stuff like that, is that we can take that content, we can push it out as a PDF. And that's something that we can do with the XSL engine. And again, just to reiterate, this is something that we can use to push out any server-side language in a sense. And so that really gives us the flexibility of working with any, web configuration, website, and web language. So this is a pretty powerful thing to really allow us to work with everybody. So just as a quick recap on the XSL side of things, we are currently using the XSL 3.0 level of functionality, or version 3.0, I should say. And this is something, like a lot of that functionality is being determined and being built out by this guy named Michael Kay, who happens to own this company called Saxonica, and they're the ones that actually make the engine that we are running. So we actually are running the Saxon engine, which is allowing us this higher end XSL functionality. And as it's continually evolving, it's getting more and more powerful. And we're just kind of continually adding those capabilities to OU Campus. And we've found that it's so far, it's been really fitting the needs as we need it so far. And there's lots of cool new functionality with it. Now, the point is not to go into all that into too much detail, but if you do have any questions about that, feel free to check in, create a support ticket, and we can work with you on those items. But just wanted to throw that out there. Okay, so just as a little bit more overview of how this works. So what's that mean for you as the administrator or the end user? So what it means is that we now have to take our HTML and what we're used to using, as a normal HTML editor, we're now going to be modifying that inside an XML file. And so what's the difference? Well, XML started before HTML. XML was a way of storing data in a textual way that could be read by humans and by machines. And so browsers and the web kind of came of that, where we said, well, let's come up with a set definition list for what these particular elements are going to look like when you put them in this browser. And so that was kind of how HTML was born. And so it's in a way, it's an offshoot of XML. So we're kind of going back to the core of what it was, the tagging, the node structure of it, and we're going back to XML. But we're calling our files PCF because, well, one, it's a unique extension that's for us, but two, it's because we need to allow for some extra functionality that's beyond just the normal XML requirements. We've got extra stuff that's happening because it's running inside our system. But ultimately, it is just an XML file. And so XML syntax requirements can, make things for you to look out for here and there if you're not wary of it. So if I can go back, and I'll demonstrate this in just a second, certain things is that to mention would be like HTML. When it evolved, the browsers, when how they interpreted that structure, that code structure, it kind of allowed for a lot more lazy coding, so to speak. And so you could have paragraph tags that opened but didn't close, and browsers like, yeah, I can figure it out from here. But because XML was written in a way that it was much more strict, that was originally how HTML was supposed to be, but it kind of allowed for more lax. There were more specific rules. And as you saw with older versions of HTML, there was the HTML 4.01 strict, or the transitional, or whatever, and that was kind of where you got some of the differences between whether it was more XML safe or whether it was more lax and stuff like that. But browsers kind of just handle it all. But since we're going back to XML, it is a little bit more strict, and so there's just a couple things that you'll look out for, and I can demonstrate those in just a second. Again, what's the point of PCF is that it's going to allow us to have a little bit extra functionality in our system. But mostly this is a file that's just going to store the page-specific content or the data. Just the title and metadata, that's what's unique to this page, and then just the page content. And then, of course, if you did want to have some layout decisions for how the page is actually going to look and work and stuff like that, then you might put that in there. But ultimately, that way, that's all that's in there. And on the diagram on the right here, there's just an example of a big one content region, but you could get the idea that maybe that's multiple things or lots of stuff going on. And then how does the XSL? Well, the XSL kind of takes that and then it creates the shell for it. It creates the whole structure. And keep in mind that XSL is also an XML file. So the coding that we do for XSL also needs to be written in a way that it adheres to XML syntax requirements. So it's just something to keep an eye out for if you do decide to embark down the road of learning XSL. And as I mentioned, we are currently running version 3.0 via Saxon. I guess I spoke too soon on that. But the idea is that this is going to store the HTML structure. It shouldn't carry any content because you don't want to be editing content in the XSL, but it should be carrying the structure of the of the HTML page. And so ultimately what it will be doing is it will be writing the HTML or server-side language code that will allow to build the rest of the page. So one of those items might be, of course, your global header and footer. And so the XSL will write the special include statements for that and put them in the right places and kind of build the page structure. And then, of course, if you did have some layout choices, oh yes, actually this is supposed to be a 2-column with left nav, well, then the XSL can write that extra include in. So that's just a quick overview on how that works. And so just as a quick kind of demonstration of some of the power and capability of the XSL, we've been doing these things called table transformations. And in a sense, these are going to be a little bit of a stopgap because of our cool new functionality called components, which is slated to come out a little bit later this year. And the idea is that we want to give the users a simple way to edit content, and then we want to have the XSL take that and transform it into something way more complicated. And until components comes out, our current option is that we use something that's pretty easy and safe to use in the WYSIWYG region that stores content in a nice structured way. And guess what? That's a table. So I know it sounds a little scary because we're supposed to not use tables and stuff like that, but that's mostly tables for design. This is still tables for storing content and data structure, so it's okay. But the idea is that we style these things to make it look a little bit nicer for the end users, a little bit like a form essentially. But our goal, and here's the example here, is that we want to have this accordion example, something that looks like this. Well, that doesn't look so bad, right? It's just a couple containers and some content in there. Why not just edit it directly? Well, the problem is when you actually go to look at the code, there's a lot of stuff there that needs to be precise. So for example, the IDs have to be unique for each accordion item. You've got to have the correct link that points to the ID of the region. And so there's lots of stuff going on with that code that would not be easily updated in the WYSIWYG. So, how do we get your users to edit that? How do you get them to know what to edit? And the point is you can't. So what we do is we create a way that mocks up how that accordion might look. So we create, let's say, a table. Okay, and we have, let's say, the first row be the title, and then the second row be the content block, and that looks very similar to how that accordion kind of looks. And then what we do is we tell the XSL to run through those rows and then pull the content out and then build it into that HTML, and you get your final product, which is then a working accordion, and it just responds to however many rows the customer needs for however many items they want. And stuff like that. And so it's a pretty powerful tool that we've been using more and more as we go and learn and adapt our implementations for all these really cool fancy features of websites and stuff like that. So if you have any questions specific about things like this, how do I get this on my site and how do I get my users to edit it, more than just source code, this is a good tool where we can work with you on maybe how to add that as a cool side feature or something like that. So just wanted to let you know how things are possible. And there you go. So what I want to do next is just real basic, show you a quick overview of how that would actually, not necessarily the table transformation, but just a real simple foray into the PCF and XSL world. Just behind the scenes a little bit. So I've created this PCF page, and as you can see, it says don't click save, add editable regions first. That's because very much like what happened when I clicked edit on my flat HTML file before I added any page regions to it, it tried to take that rendered content and put it into a WYSIWYG region. The problem is that a PCF is a very different structure than HTML. And so it's actually going to try and throw all of the PCF structure into the WYSIWYG, which then isn't going to look so great. So we don't necessarily want to save that. We want to just quickly switch over to source. Now, hopefully you guys should never have to deal with that because ideally your pages should be tagged properly and built properly out so that they actually have editable regions. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that this has that. Well, the problem is that this is a PCF page. As you can see, this is XML, and we are pointing it to a particular XSL. So it's just a quick, example of how you can find out what XSL is transforming your content, and you can see what extension it's pushing it out as. So that means that when this PCF page publishes, it's going to be an HTML page. So if I wanted this to be PHP, I could change that extension right here. Then I'm going to skip a couple items, and I'm going to come down and I'm going to show you. One of the XML syntax requirements is that you have a root node in which all of your content then lives. And this is our root node document. And inside there, we have a couple nodes that we use, but aren't necessarily built into the system. These are just things that we use for making your life easier. And the idea is that now, because we're storing just the specific content of your page, we need a way that you can easily insert content into certain points of your page that are commonly needed. So for example, if you need to throw some CSS or JavaScript that's specific to your page up into the head region, well, we have a little node for you to store that. If you need to throw something in right after the opening body tag, let's say Google Tag Manager or something like that, then you can throw it in right here on. And if you have something like a JavaScript that goes down at the bottom, or something else that just needs to go down to the bottom of the page, then we have a little node for you here. Keep in mind, these are not built into the system. And so if you add these to your template and you didn't have them, then they probably aren't going to do anything, because you need to set them up in the XSL to actually make use of those nodes. But if we take a look down here, you'll see something that should look a little bit familiar from when I typed out in the HTML previously. We have an OUC properties tag, and now you can see it in our newer node style format, or tag style. And in this case, it actually, actually has the opening tag and a closing tag. It's not the embedded HTML. This case, this is just XML nodes at this point. And we just have our title and metadata content just living right inside there like we had before. But we've also got some other ones down here now too, these parameter nodes. These parameter nodes are those form field entry that I was talking about previously, similar to multi-edit, but these are the ones that show up in your properties/parameters portion for editing the page. And this is where we can make settings about how to display the page, and maybe some lockdown content like I have here with this heading field and stuff like that. So this is just a starter page that has some stuff, and I have a little editable region. So this should look pretty familiar from when I made the one in the HTML. And that's it. That's the end of the document. Nothing really going on here. And the funny thing is that when I hit save, none of that is being used here. So what's going on? Well, for us to do that, we have to go follow the XSL. Fortunately, I happen to have it open in my other tab, so I've switched over. So just as a quick rundown, you can see that this is also an XML document. And then we have which version of XSL we're using here. This allows us the latest functionality. And then we come down, you can see that we're importing one other document. I don't have too much other stuff in here other than some system variables and a couple other settings, which I'll not go into in this particular session. But if you're interested, I'm happy to explain those via support ticket or whatever, or at the end of the call, or WebEx, or whatever we call it, Zoom meeting now. And then we get into the output. So this is an important setting, because if we don't have this, the XSL is going to try and do its best guess as to what you're doing. And in this case, we really want to make sure that it's correct, because rather than just guessing any old HTML, we wanted to guess that we're actually outputting HTML5. Now, if you had another output style of HTML that you were trying to use, then you'd use that instead. But most of the world is going to HTML5, which is allows for a lot of really cool functionality, so you're going to want to use it. So that's just a couple things to keep in mind. And then we get right down here to where we actually build the HTML out of our page. This is, without going into too much detail with the XSL side, this template matches. This is basically a match for the root document node, right? So pointing back to our PCF page, here's our root document. Our root node, which stores the contents of the page. So we basically match that, and we say, okay, when you find that, go ahead and start building your HTML, and this is ultimately going to be the output that we get to our production server, or just what you see in preview, etc. But when the XSL gets run, this is what you'll end up seeing. So this is not going to be all that helpful. This is some hard-coded HTML that's super simple. You know, how do we get that to then build the HTML that we ultimately want, you know, from our HTML page here? So what I can do, and this is just a quick example, but what I can do is I can just take all this HTML, I can copy it, and I can paste it and just replace this set of HTML here. The XSL will actually write the document, the doc type tag in there. And if you want some formatting, there's a cool trick where you can highlight everything and then click Shift Tab, and it will just kind of readjust everything for you, make it a little bit easier to read. So we just throw the HTML tag in there, and then that's basically the content that we're going to write. And this is where you have to keep in mind about some of the settings. Now, if I was pulling this HTML from somewhere else, it most likely wouldn't have these special self-closing tags, because this is okay, this is acceptable in HTML, but it's not acceptable in XML. And so if I were to save this and leave it like that, and then I come back to my PCF page to then try and preview it, I'm going to get an error, and it's basically going to let me know that I need to terminate my particular meta tag with a matching end tag. Or in this case, really what I should be doing is I should be self-closing it. And so I can go through and I can just fix those other ones. Other common ones are like link for CSS and like image tags, and then inputs for forms and things like that. So those are some other common ones that you'll see. And so that's all great. So I'm going to go ahead, after I fix that, I'm going to save it, and then I'm going to preview again. And now you'll see that all of a sudden now I've got my HTML output. So I'm almost halfway there in a way. And so the next item is that, well, I still have hard-coded HTML. Yeah, I've got these OUC property tags, but look what happens when I click edit. I still get pushed back into here. And the reason for that is that these are HTML comments. And so we actually need these to go out to the rendered output, because we need the system to recognize that they're there. Because XSL is also an XML-based language, this is registered as a comment for the XML or the XSL, and so it won't actually make it out. So what I need to do is really, I don't want this hard-coded anyways. I want this to be pulled from the PCF page. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do just a real simple XSL copy of, and I'm just going to go ahead and grab that content via XPath. This is the language that's like a sub-language of XSL that lets you navigate an XML document to find the content that you're looking for. So I can start with document. I can do into the OUC properties tag. And then I want to grab the title, and I want to grab, let's say, or I can grab the meta tags themselves. This is real simple, just to bring those in. And if I do this other thing, this is a little trick here to get rid of our namespaces that sometimes get added. So if I add that in, now you're not going to see this too much, but if I do click properties now, you'll see that I will have the description keywords. Those things are now coming in. And then if I come down here, instead of this particular editable region, just like that, I don't want it hard-coded anymore. I want to bring that in from the page. So what I'm going to do is the same one for now. And then I'm going to just go in and grab it. And so I can start from the root if I really want to, or I can start from the current context, which is the fact that I've already matched that root document node up here. And I can go straight into it by saying OUC div. And then potentially I want to look for a very specific one. So it's a little bit more advanced, but you can just follow along for now. I'm just, whoops, if I can type. And I'm just going to say, what did I call it? That's a good question. That's just main content. So we'll just steal this one editable region for now. And I'm just going to copy it in. I don't need to worry about the namespace for this case. And then what I'm going to do is just reformat it. Those will just fix those and save that. And I save in place, Control or Command S, depending on your Mac or PC. And then I can immediately go over and then preview this guy. And then now you can see that my content comes in here. And when I click Edit, now I get my Edit button. And I can now edit this just as I did previously. Okay. And in a sense, I've created the little mini XSL template, so to speak. It's not a template for creating new pages yet, but it's something that I could turn into one of those. All I need to do is create more of this PCF page, and I can then have it as a template. So that's just a couple settings. As you can see, I'm not making use of the heading or the layout. I could go into some of that in a little bit more detail, but I just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of an overview of how that stuff comes together to create your final product and why you might see some functionality and some characteristics. For example, like if you are editing source and you don't have an ampersand encoded. So if I said amp and something and Robert, you can see that the source editor is kind of highlighting that entity name must be, and that's because, well, not only is this a problem in XML, but it's actually still a problem in HTML as well. So you want to just make sure that those, characters, if you're copying over from Word or something like that, they'll, and you're putting into source code, and that's the big item here, is that if you're putting into source code straight, you want to make sure that it's not only HTML safe but XML safe. And then what happens is then the HTML in the browser converts that into what you would actually see. And so that's going to be consistent even if you are working in an HTML only page. But there are sometimes the XML rules are a little more strict. So that's just why you might see some of these issues here and there. But they're not really issues. It's just something that you just need to be aware of for when you're working on it. So hopefully that helps a little bit with overview of how OU Campus leverages XSL to create and build out your templates, and how we go through and kind of do a little bit of the template development to get you your output the way that you want it to work, and how you can manage it and distribute it so that your users can easily modify and update your website. So hopefully this has been helpful. I'm going to go back into the PowerPoint. I don't really have too much more other than question and answer, but if we just go to the next slide, I just wanted to mention that the next Training Tuesday will be held on August 28th, and Barbara will be hosting, and she'll be covering the excellent topic of managing access everywhere, in which case she's going to do like a deep dive on how to go in and maintain access settings, not just for your normal pages, but throughout all of OU Campus, managing for assets, managing it for snippets, managing it for all kinds of things in OU Campus. So more on that next month. I will let Erica help with dealing with questions or any other
Yes.
final words.
If there's any lingering questions, now is the chance to get them in. As always, the session is recorded and you'll be able to view it on our support site and on our Vimeo channel by the end of today. We will also be posting the other resources that Rob mentioned, such as the files and the PDF. So those will be linked to in the same place as the video. Or if you prefer that we send them to you directly, we can also email you with that PDF. And I'm not seeing any questions come in. And I know for us West Coasters, it is almost lunchtime, so I'm sure some of us would like to get going. So in that case, I will wrap this up. Like Rob said, next Training Tuesday, August 28th, we're going to be talking about access settings. And thank you everyone for attending. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Oh, wait. I see, I saw one question, but it was a thank you. All right. Okay. Thank you, everybody.